Well, hello everyone, this is DC with the DC Capstone Report. Welcome you in to another podcast on Alabama football. Coming off of a big victory against Ole Miss on Saturday. Today in the podcast, in the first segment, we're going to review the game against Ole Miss. In our second segment, we're going to take a look at our players of the game. In our third and final segment, we're going to preview the upcoming game against the Texas A&M Aggies. You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on the Martin Houston Show at Tide 100.9. You can listen live at Tide100.9.com. Well, it's great to be back on another podcast talking about my favorite subject and yours, Alabama football. Well, we're going to preview in this first segment the game against Ole Miss and just overall really good game. Want to say that I was so proud of our defense. Our defense stepped up to the plate. And I think really had a great game plan. I give Pete Golden credit. He called a great game, had prepared them well, and really he did exactly what I predicted that they should do on the last podcast, and that is pressure up the middle, keep Matt Corral in the pocket, pressure the quarterback so he limits his downfield throws, and play the run well and tackle well, play sound defensive football. And that's exactly what they did in this game. You know, we got off to a fast start in this game. Ole Miss drove the ball down, and on a critical fourth down, we didn't abandon our defensive scheme where we were going to pound the middle, and they tried to run up the middle, and we stopped them on a critical fourth down, and that set the tone for the defense for the rest of the game. We held the highest scoring offensive team in college football. They were number one in scoring, number one in rushing, number one in passing, number one overall offense coming into Bryant-Denny Stadium. We held them to 0 points in the first half. If you look at their statistics for the game, we held them for 213 yards passing, and they didn't have a single runner over 50 yards. Their number 3 tailback, the Henry Parrish kid, who ran 11 times for 47 yards, was the most any runner had. The big two, Jerrion Ely and Jared Connor, they only had 16 yards and 12 yards. So our defense played a whale of a game in this game, and I was so happy about them coming out. And I thought they came out and played with intensity, came out and played with passion from the very beginning. They'd heard all the talk about how great this offense was. And this defensive team really stepped up and played a great job all over across the board, from the defensive line to the linebackers to the back end safeties and cornerbacks. They played a great game. And on offense, we did exactly what we talked about last week on the podcast: run the ball to set up the play action passing, and that's exactly what happened in this game. When Alabama had the ball, they ran the ball. In this game, Brian Robinson ran 36 times for 171 yards, averaging 4.8 yards a carry and 4 touchdowns. Brian Robinson was the workhorse, and it was his turn, and he stepped up to the plate. Did the same thing to Ole Miss that Najee Harris did to him last year when they played in Oxford, and that is run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Ole Miss didn't have an answer for Brian Robinson running the ball. And that opened up Bryce Young to be able to throw the ball. And he was 20 of 26 for 241 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 interception that he shouldn't have thrown, but he played a great game as well on offense. So running the ball, him throwing the ball out of play action passes, and spreading the ball around the way he did. You know, Jameis Williamson had 5 catches. Slade Bolden had 4 catches. Jaleel Bisley 4 catches. John Mechie 3 catches. And then you got the ball to Trayshawn Holden, Jace McClellan, Cameron Latu, and JoJo Earl. All of them had catches in this game. So being able to spread the ball around and run the ball on offense. Now, we talked about last week what run the ball would do. It would do 2 things. It would give play action passing ability for Bryce Young, and that occurred. And then it would take time off the clock and limit Ole Miss's opportunities to have the score in the game and have the ball score. And I think that really affected Ole Miss in the first half, because when they got stopped on that first fourth down play, that set the tone on defense. And then as we ran the ball and took time off the clock, it made them want to be more aggressive and have to do things and go for 4th downs again. I think they went for 3 4th downs and then missed on all 3 of those in critical times, and we got the ball back, and that really turned the tide, if you will, of this game. So Alabama plays a great game. defeats Ole Miss 42-21, and those 21 points came from Ole Miss late in the game. Never was much in doubt after that opening defensive game plan that they really showed up in that first half. So overall, a great game against Ole Miss. I think Alabama heard the chatter about maybe this was the best offensive team that we'd played. We'd struggled against Florida, so what were we going to do against a great team like Ole Miss? And I think this defense stood up and took the challenge, and I'm sure they practiced well, and it showed on game day. So again, Alabama beats Ole Miss 42-21. Well, here in our second segment, we're going to take a look at our players of the game. Well, on offense, you have to start with Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson, as I said before, the workhorse in this game, one of my offensive players of the game. He goes for 36 carries for 171 yards. He's coming off of a rib injury. I know he was nicked up, but he still continued to play. He still created a lot of value for himself in this game, being able to carry the ball so much and gain so many yards. So having 4 touchdowns and an average of 4.8 yards a carry is just an amazing thing in this game. And I was just so proud of Brian Robinson getting his time to shine. So he was one of my offensive players of the game. My other offensive player of the game is Bryce Young, quarterback. No doubt, 20 for 26, 241 yards and 2 touchdowns. Had the 1 interception that he'd like to have gotten back. But overall, I praise him in this game for his ability to get us in the right plays, make the right throws, distribute the ball around, and to be able to make good decisions when he has the ball. So my offensive players of the game for the Ole Miss game were Brian Robinson and Bryce Young. Now, I have more defensive players of the game this week simply because I think the defense picked up the task, and they took Ole Miss to task in this game, and I was so proud of them. So, number one defensive player of the game has to be, and has been so far, every game so far, and that is Will Anderson Jr. I think Lane Kiffin gave him the greatest compliment you could give in his post-game press conference when he said, "Hey, that number 31, I know he's got another year, but he could go this year and be number 1 in the draft. He's that good, folks." And Will Anderson Jr. pressured the quarterback. He was able to stop the run. He was instrumental on setting the edge. And so in this game, he is one of my defensive players of the game. My second defensive player of the game is a guy I've always been high on. I've talked to you about him on my podcast before. To me, he reminds me of Christian Barmore, reminds me of Quinion Williams, and that is Tim Smith, number 50. He plays the nose, and he came in, and we were rotating our defensive linemen out. He didn't start, but he came in at the end of that drive on that 4th down critical play, and he played his gap, he played sound, he hit the running back in the hole and stopped him for negative yards to set the tone on that big 4th down play. And he had a great game the rest of the game. I was so proud of him as he got into play. So he is my second defensive player of the game. My third defensive player of the game is Demarco Hellums. Demarco Hellums was a big hitter in this game. He got the attention of a lot of folks the way he hit in this game. He had 6 tackles and 5 assists in this game. He was all over the field. He was playing the pass well, and he also did a good job of tackling. And my other defensive player of the game also comes out of that back deep in the secondary, and that is Jordan Battle. Jordan Battle was all over the field, 7 tackles and 2 assists. So he did a great job. So those 2 safeties and those 2 defensive linemen, I believe, set the tone in this game. We're going to stop it up front. We're going to tackle well. We're going to cover the pass well. And they are my defensive players of the game. So offensive players of the game were, again, Brian Robinson and Bryce Young. And on defense, Will Anderson Jr., Tim Smith, Demarco Hellums, and Jordan Battle. Well, here in the third and final segment on the DC Capstone Report, we're going to preview the upcoming Texas A&M game. Before I do that, though, I want to remind you that Lance Shores does a great job of production on this podcast, and he has some great websites out there, so I encourage everyone to go out and look at RollTideBama.com and FreelancePictures.com. Lance puts up a lot of content from the pictures that he takes from the ball games, does a great job of putting up videos of the $1 Million Band, of the cheerleaders, of the Crimson Nets, and of the game itself. So if you have opportunity to go out and check out Lance's sites at freelancepictures.com and RollTideBama.com. Well, we're getting to preview the upcoming game against the Texas A&M Aggies. Going out there to College Station to play a game out there in Texas. It's a great facility. Been out there before. One of my favorite SEC stadiums to get to go. It's a great atmosphere. Alabama have an opportunity to play under the lights. It's going to be a night game, so play under the lights out there in College Station, Texas. And that Texas A&M may not be as best. They're coming off of a defeat by Mississippi State. They had a close game with Colorado earlier in the year. They have lost some games, but I believe they still have a lot of fight in them, so we can't take this game lightly. We can't have a letdown. The one thing I caution about is we can't have a letdown in this game coming off of a high emotional game. When your team gets up to face a team that everybody's saying is so much better than them, and then to go to play another team, there's still enough bite in this Aggie squad that we could come out of there with a loss if we're not careful. So what does Alabama have to do? Well, on defense, we've got to go out there and pressure the young quarterback. Texas A&M had an injury at quarterback, so they got a young quarterback starting. Doesn't have as much experience. We've got to pressure him. If we put pressure on him, if Will Anderson Jr. can pressure him from the outside, Drew Sanders from the outside, and then your middle linemen like Fendarian Mathis and DJ Dale and Tim Smith and Stephon Wynn, Jamil Burrows, just LeBron Ray, all of them, if they can get pressure up the middle, I really believe that we can do a good job of putting pressure on the quarterback. The second thing we're going to have to do is stop the run. Isaiah Spiller is one of the best running backs in the SEC this year, and they can really gash you if you're not careful on running ball. He's got a lot of speed, he's got a lot of quickness, so we're going to have to stop the run. We can't worry enough about the quarterback that we forget about the great running backs they have. So if we will pressure the quarterback, keep him in the pocket, make him beat us with his arm instead of his legs, and then stop the run with some great tackling with support from our middle linebackers and our safeties, I really believe that we're going to have a really good showing on our defense if we just keep this defensive team up and running against the Texas A&M Aggies. What do we do on offense? Well, I believe it all starts up front with running the ball. Now, we're going to be a little down our running game because Jace McClellan is injured in the last game, has a knee injury. It's going to keep him out for a while, maybe for the season. We're not sure yet. We'll know more today about that. But that means Brian Robinson is going to carry the load, and he comes off a game where he's already carried it 36 times, and he's got a little dinged up himself. So where do we go? We got Roydale Williams behind him, Trey Sanders. So who will be the next back if we need him in this game? Will Kyle Edwards get to play, or will it be a freshman, Kamar Wheaton? Will we get to see him in this game? Where does Alabama go? I think we'll learn more about that and see who gets reps in practice this week. But this next man up for this offense, because we got to run the ball. We found out, I believe, in our last game that running the ball to set up the pass is the way we're going to win these games offensively. So I think Alabama starts with a run and then the play-action passing game. And I love the way Bryce Young is distributing the ball. I think get our tight ends involved in the game a little more. Distribute that ball around so that we have a lot more people in the passing game. Run the ball effectively. I think we're going to go in there and we're going to play a good Texas A&M team under the lights. Be the last game of the day, a night game, so we have to wait a while to get started. I think the most important thing for this Alabama team to come out come out passionate, come out engaged, and come out fresh in whether they start on offense or defense. They need that first series to be a game-setting attention getter, and that is what either stop them if they got the ball first, or us go down and score on that first one to set a tone for this game on the road. We can't have a letdown. We need to limit our penalties, limit our mistakes, our mental errors, and play a good, solid game, both defensively and offensively. If we do that, I believe we're going to come out of a victory there, leave Texas with a victory, and come back home beating the Aggies. The score, my prediction, Alabama 48, Texas A&M 21. Well, that's all we have this week for the DC Capstone Report. I thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate all of you who commented and reached out. Thank you for liking us on Facebook. You can check us out on Facebook. You can also check us out at dccapstonereport.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at DavidCott50. Until next time, this is DC for Lance Shores, and we thank you again. And don't forget to follow Lance. It's RollTideBama.com and FreelancePictures.com. We'll see you next week as we review the Texas A&M Aggie game. This is DC with the DC Capstone Report. Roll Tide.